Thank you. And those are important announcements. Socially speaking, our club works really hard to try to engage outside of the meeting, outside of the committees. So those of you that haven't attended a meeting before, with a lot of the members that we have in our organization, we're able to provide really great experiences. So I want to give a big thank you to Will Rothermel and Denark and Frank and everybody for helping put together the stadium tour. I know Sandy Martin was instrumental in that also, and our own member, Rotarian Randy Boyd also. So thank you for doing that. And I'd say that if you can't make the tour, definitely meet us at Barley's afterwards. It's always fun to get together in that setting. And then also to Liz Dreger and her whole team with the bowling initiative. That's not just our club. That's beyond our club, various organizations, and certainly an important cause. So thank you for all of your work in exciting that. Well, we come together each week to learn a little bit about Rotary and also to learn about meaningful people in our community. And today you get to hear from someone who has spoken before and someone who's also a current Rotarian. So it's my pleasure today to get to introduce our first speaker, who will then be passing it over to our second. Brittany Tarwater spoke to us about a year ago, if that's correct. Brittany is a multi-Emmy and Edward R. Murrow Award anchor and multimedia journalist from WBLT. So that's one of the highest ranking acknowledgments and achievements that you can get in the industry. Being honored with 6 Emmy Awards for her work. One of those in particular, most recently, was the WBLT Originals documentary that she credited the 3 of the awards, the Edward R. Murrow Award in 2024 for A Tennessee Waltz, Ray Blanton's Last Dance. So for those of you that were here to hear about Ray Blanton and that incredible program, it was really interesting. And also the actual airing of the story too was remarkable to hear. So we're really fortunate to have Brittany's expertise and talent. In fact, she's so talented with her industry that she's now an assistant professor at the University of Tennessee School of Journalism, and she is a Knoxville Sports Hall of Fame board member. So she not only has been very involved in the community, but she's also helping spread the importance of journalism to many of the students here. A Tennessee graduate and a master's graduate also. Brittany was a highly achieved swimmer with the University of Tennessee Lady Vols, and I can say I swam in masters with Brittany, and she is very fast. So, and married to the 2012 U.S. Olympic gold medalist Davis Tarwater here in the community. They're parents to 2, Davis and Clara, son and daughter, and I'm sure that they are going to be well bred for total success in the pool. But ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Brittany Tarwater.
Thank you all, and Chris, thank you. Yes, Chris, we've been friends for a long time, and he's been friends with my husband for a really long time. So Chris just is really, as you all know, a special person, an important person in our lives and in our family as well. So thank you all for having us here again. It's so good to see some familiar faces. I told him that the biggest title is that I'm Rachel's Towers' best friend. So that was my most notable accomplishment. But I'm so honored and so thrilled to be here to talk about one of my favorite people and to introduce to some of you and to reintroduce to most of you Dave Winstrom. And if you know Dave, and if you have known Dave for a long time, then he's probably never really shared some of the major accomplishments and milestones that he has reached in his career. He's just not the kind of person to talk about himself in that way. So I get to do something. But it truly is outstanding, the things that he has done and the ways that he has contributed to the field of journalism and the ways that he continues to give back and to shed light on this new generation of journalists that he gets to work with now. So right now, his title is Managing Executive Producer at WBLT, and I think he has worked every shift. Right now, he gets up very, very early. I'm not sure that you actually do sleep, but especially not during Lady Ball basketball season. That is definitely the case. But he gets up very early in the morning, and he is there for our first shift, which is where he gets to work with Olivia and Harry and our morning team, putting together content, making editorial decisions, deciding what we're going to run, why we're going to run it, asking those hard questions and having those conversations with our producers and our anchors and our team that puts our content together. So that's a big part of what he is doing right now in the morning, is working with these young journalists and mentoring people, and again, having those conversations about what we're running and where and why, and those meaningful conversations and the discussions that blossom out of that. But before he was in Knoxville, he's had a long career in broadcast news, so he's seen a lot of change and evolution in the field and the way that we tell stories and the way that we do our research. Notably, he spent time in New Orleans and in Knoxville as news director in some of the shops that are here, and then spent 20 years at Fox News in New York as one of the managers there. So you don't get there and you don't stay there for that long unless you really know what you're doing and you're able to contribute meaningfully to the content that's being covered. So it's quite a bit of time there. He's covered Super Bowls and worked with affiliates all across the country. If you're not familiar with the way that our industry is set up, you have something like a Fox News, and then you have other Fox affiliates and channels all across the country, right? Same with other networks. So he was in part responsible for coordinating coverage with all of the affiliates across the country. So that's a massive feat, as you can imagine. That has covered Super Bowls and coordinated coverage with local stations at Super Bowls, many elections, as you can imagine. Political conventions, and of course many hurricanes, most notably Katrina, which of course ravaged the town that he is cares deeply for in New Orleans, where he still has some family there. So we are very, very blessed to have Dave back in Knoxville so he can shed some of that leadership on WVLT and then spread that into folks like you and into our community, and be a part of, again, those editorial decisions that trickle down. We say, first things first, you got to win the morning, right? So we start with morning news, and he's the leader of that, and then that's how you can win the day. So he's involved in how to structure our content, how to make our decisions, and how to decide where to put reporters and when and how. And that's a lot of work. And those conversations are really hard, and they are meaningful, and they are intentional. And Dave is really good at that. And if you've heard Dave talk about journalism, he says right now, we need good journalists more now than ever before. So we are so blessed that he is able to provide that leadership and that knowledge and that insight and how to do this job and how to do it well and how to do it mainly with integrity. So not only is he able to provide that knowledge and lead by example, he is the person who we go to when we have hard decisions to make on content, how we're going to cover content, ethical decisions. He's the person, at least personally for me, I mean, we've known each other for almost a decade now, and he's the first person who I'll call when I'm ever in a bind or have a question or really want to have somebody with true insight on how to make these decisions. He's the first person that I'll call, not only professionally, but also as a friend. So we're so blessed to have him in that role, but mainly also his leadership with kindness. So if you do know Dave and you have spoken to Dave, then that is the thing that you know about him, is that he leads with that kindness. That's the kind of, he treats people with kindness, he treats people with respect. And when you do that, then you feel valued, whether that's interpersonally or whether that's coming through a screen. You can feel that, and he's the person who is teaching the rest of us how to do all of that. So we're so glad to have him in that role. But also, I'll give you a quick example, and this is not about news at all, but it is a reflection of who this person is. Dave, I'm not sure how this conversation really got started, but I know he got a phone call one day and said, there's a person who really needs a kidney. And you're a match. And this is not someone who Dave knew personally. This was not a family member. This wasn't even someone in Knoxville. And he said, okay, where do I sign up? And he had surgery, and he donated his kidney to a complete stranger. That person is no longer a stranger. Now that person is part of his community and part of his friend network and part of Dave's family, as you can imagine after going through that. That's just one example of the kind of person he is. And you can see how he would implement that Northern Star into other places of his life. Not only can he do it, but he can teach it. and he can teach kindness. And we are so, so glad, Dave, to have you in this community. We're just so happy to have you back in Knoxville and at WVLT, and I'm just so honored and blessed to call you my friend, because we are all better in this community because of this man right here. So I am so thrilled and honored to introduce my friend, Dave Winstrom.
Okay. All right. The kidney thing, I'll just, the kidney thing was not a big deal to me, and I shouldn't, I'm sorry to put it like that, but I mean, my daughter came home one day and said, a friend of hers, her father had been on kidney dialysis for 3 years, and that he had been on a donor waiting list. And anyway, he had been to the doctor, and they told him that it wasn't gonna last much longer. My daughter was all upset, and anyway, he lived in Pittsburgh, and I called the hospital in Pittsburgh and said, I'd like to be considered, and that's how it started. And it took a year, and he almost, we didn't think Steve was gonna make it, but he did. And one day I went to Nashville and Vanderbilt Hospital, and at 6 a.m. they took out my kidney and put it in a cooler with a 6-pack of beer, shipped it to Pittsburgh. 6 o'clock that night, they put it in Steve, and he's doing great. And I'm real happy about that. He is, I did not know him, but I hear from him about once a week. I get a text from him telling me what he's up to. He has 3 beautiful grandchildren. I get lots of pictures of the grandkids. He and his wife just had their 50th wedding anniversary. He stopped by a couple of years ago, so I did get to meet him finally in person. And look, I'm very happy about it, and I'm very happy for him and his family. And as far as my life hasn't changed. I still eat everything. I still do everything. I don't play rugby. I don't want to take a kidney hit, but other than that. And if the Lord would want to take me because I have 1 kidney, it was well worth it. So anyway, when Allison called me, I was a little thought, you want me to speak at Rotary? You want me to speak with all these people that I know that I speak to? Anyway, and she said yes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about journalism, but she asked me to talk about some of the people I've met and some of the people I've worked with over the years, and that would take a long time. But I've been very, very lucky, very fortunate that I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of, I think, some of the world's best journalists. I've been very fortunate that I've had an opportunity to meet some wonderful people, some people in so many different industries, and so many in sports, so many in music, and just a lot of great people, and in politics. And I will, and I think it's Rob who always asks at our birthday party, when we have this Rotary birthday party, who has had the opportunity to shake hands with the president. And I have had the opportunity to do that with a couple of presidents. And because I've been in this business so long, I know I've been in a room with every president since Jimmy Carter. Okay. But the first president I ever actually shook hands with, I was in New Orleans, and it was the early 80s, and Ronald Reagan was coming to speak at a luncheon, and he, after the luncheon, they were having a press conference, and when a president travels, all the national media travels with them, and the national media gets first priority over everything. And so the hotel where he was speaking, they set up a separate room for the press conference, and everybody, the national media went in, set up. Somebody came out and said, there's no room for the local media. We finally argued it with them for a while, and they said, all right, we're gonna let one of you in. And we drew straws, and I ended up going in. And anyway, there wasn't any room, and I was all the way in the back in the corner and had a little hard time setting. I finally got set up, and there's a podium down in the front, and there's a door off to the side of the podium that we're all waiting for the president to walk through. And all of a sudden, the door behind me opens, and two security people walk through, and behind them is President Reagan, who shakes my hand and says, "Hi, I'm Ron Reagan." I said, "Hi, I'm Dave Winstrom." He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "New Orleans." And he said, "You live here all your life?" I said, "I know, I grew up in Indiana." He said, "I'm from Illinois." I said, "I read that about you, I know." And I think I got married a few weeks before that, so we started talking about that. Finally, one of his people grabs his arm and said, "Mr. President, we need to do the press conference." And he says, "Oh, all right." And so they go down and he answers questions for 45 minutes or so, and then they came back the same way. And he shakes my hand again and said, "Dave, really nice to meet you." And I said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. President." He said, "Call me Ron." And he walks off. Anyway, it was 25 years later or so. I'm working at Fox News in New York, and I'm working like a little late one night. I'm leaving the newsroom, and I'm heading for the front doors, and the front doors open up, and two very large men walk through side by side, and you can take a look at them, and you know that they're bodyguards for someone. Anyway, it opens up. They step apart, and walking through them is Mikhail Gorbachev, the last president of the Soviet Union, who shakes my hand and says, "Are you John Moody?" And I said, "No, sir, I'm not, but I know where he is, and I can take you there to him." So the newsroom was a long newsroom, so we're walking through the newsroom, and he says to me, "Do you like baseball?" I said, "Well, yes, of course I like baseball." And he says, I go New York Yankee game tonight." And I said, I can't remember now who was playing, but back then I did, and I know. And I said, you're gonna see a good game." And he said, I know no baseball." And I said, just go, enjoy the crowd, have yourself a hot dog and a beer." And he smiled and said, "I like American hot dog." So I got him where he was going. And on the train home that night, I was thinking about this, and I'm thinking, how lucky am I, this small town kid from the Midwest who has had the opportunity to actually meet and shake hands with the two people who stopped the Cold War. I always remember that line, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." That was pretty special for me anyway. So and then while I was in New Orleans, I was a photographer for a number of years, and when I moved there, I started working with the PBS station. I wasn't making any money, and I got married, and so I did every freelance job I could get. And there's a lot of freelance in New Orleans, a lot of sports, like the Superdome, but a lot of football games, and there was a lot of music, HBO and ESPN, and all the networks would come, and it was cost effective for them to hire a local guy rather than fly somebody in with all their equipment and all of that. So I got a lot of nice jobs over the years, freelance, but that took me, in '84, I was asked by ABC to work at the Olympics in Los Angeles, which was great. Now, the Olympics in Los Angeles, I'm a big basketball fan, and Bobby Knight, I went to Indiana University. Bobby Knight was the coach of the men's basketball team. And I've met Bobby Knight. I have some stories about him, but we don't have enough time. Anyway, but the women's coach was Coach Pat Summitt, who I never knew. And so I was reading about her and learning a little bit about her as I went, excuse me. But I never really met her when I was out there. But when I moved here in the '90s, I did get a chance to meet her. I was the news director, so I went to several events where we had a chance to meet. And then her son and my son are the same age. They were born a day apart, and Sam and Tyler, and they were on the same soccer team, 8-9-year-old soccer team at the time. And so on Saturday mornings, she and I would be standing on the sidelines a lot, watching kids play soccer. And we had a lot of discussions, usually about Bobby Knight. She was a huge Bobby Knight fan also. And so anyway, Coach Summitt and I one morning were standing there watching the kids, and she looked at me, she said, "So you're a news director." She said, "How many news directors in this town are men, and how many news directors in this town are women?" And I said, I don't think I know all of them with the radio stations, but all the news directors I know are men. And she said, do you know why men are in positions of leadership and authority more than women? And I said, no, I don't. And she said, team sports. She said, when you were growing up, she said, what'd you play? I said, I played basketball, I played baseball, and you know. She said, in your school, did they have a program for women to play sports? I said, no, they didn't. And she said, the thing is, men, it's instinctive in them when they're playing team sports. They understand that teamwork is how you win. And that transfers over into the business world. It transfers over into life. And then she said, we're changing that. And she did. She was the one who did it. And I know everybody thinks of Pat Summitt as the woman who made women's basketball to put it on the map. But the fact of the matter is, when I think of her legacy to me is she made leaders. She created leaders in our world and every basketball program that followed her and all the different schools all around. That's what she did. That's the legacy that I remember with Pat Summitt. So anyway, I'm here to talk about journalism. So I'm going to tell you exactly what I tell my class. First day of class which was last week actually. Journalism's in trouble. And if you're really serious about being a journalist, you need to step up and save this industry. We have problems, and by being a true journalist, and the simple fact is, you seek the truth, you report it, honest, fair, and balanced. That's the key to journalism. And you make an obligation, a commitment to your community, to your readers, to your viewers, that you're going to be a true journalist. And if you're in this class because you want to be famous or you want to make a lot of money, you're probably in the wrong class. And so we need true journalists. I really believe, and I know this, that journalism makes a better America. Our country's foundation was built on a free and honest press. And the First Amendment is first for a reason. How did we get in this position? We have a crisis in confidence and trust. We've lost it. This is a Gallup poll. It was done in October. Now remember, this is a month before the election. 69% of Americans, not much trust or none at all in the media. Now Gallup has been doing this poll since 1972. And in 1972, 75% of Americans had a great deal of trust in the media. So we think about that 69% and we compare it to politics, or politicians. That same poll, 65% of Americans have not much trust or none at all in Congress. So people have more trust in politicians than they have in journalists right now. So the bottom line is we have a trust problem in our country. And I don't think it's just the media, and I don't think it's just politics. It's the courts. The Supreme Court is taking a hit. The Department of Justice, the FBI. How did this happen? This isn't Cuba. This isn't Russia. This is the United States of America. How did we get here? How do we get so polarized? Well, I'll tell you, and this comes from someone who's been in the media for a long time. When it comes to the media, I believe we did it to ourselves. Ted Turner started 24-hour news in 1980. And I thought it was a good idea back then, but a lot of people laughed about it, and I guess it's caught on. So, but the problem is, how do you keep people's attention for 24 hours? And how do you keep the interest up for 24 hours? How do you bring them back? And Ted Turner started opinion programming. In today's world, people can't tell that difference. They really, and it's tough to tell the difference, let me put it that way. But when I started at Fox News all those years ago, we did regular news all day long until 7 o'clock at night, and then we started opinion programming. And that opinion programming was just Ted Turner's formula. So, and we didn't make any news. The first 3 years of Fox News, we were not making a profit, and then this guy by the name of Bill O'Reilly caught on. Started doing the no spin zone. And Fox News ratings became #1, and they've been #1 ever since. Many people agreed with Bill O'Reilly. That's why, I mean, well, let's say about half the country, the way this country is divided, about half the country agreed with Bill O'Reilly. So Roger Ailes, who started Fox News, and Ted Turner knew something that a lot of us didn't want to admit, but Central Dynamics did a study some time ago, several years ago actually, but consumers perceive news to be of higher quality when it confirms what they already believe to be true. News organizations have an economic incentive to fit their coverage to their viewers' pre-existing worldviews. The problem is that's not journalism. And we're all confused right now about what is opinion and what's real journalism. You know, a lot of people complain about biased news media, but the ratings at Fox are very well good, and the ratings at CNN, well, they aren't as good as they used to be, but trust me, CNN's making money. But then we add to that trust issue, social media, and how the information flow of everything we're getting anymore is so different than it used to be, in that, I mean, we all have our phones, that we're all getting alerts on our phone whenever there's an important story out there. So Fox News viewers, the average age of a Fox News viewer right now is 68 years old. Pew Research, 39% of Americans under 30 years old who get most of their news from TikTok. Now, Fox News knows that you people who are 68 years and older aren't going to be around for a long time. So they're moving to social media also, okay? And, but there are legitimate social media sites, and you know, our station has a website, or all local stations have a website, the newspaper has a website. These are legitimate sites, but there are a lot of sites. TikTok, I'm not sure I would call a legitimate news site. And what happens is that disinformation erodes trust. You know, when free speech is one thing, but you know, before social media, before all these phones and our iPads and everything, we all knew that shouting fire in a crowded theater was not a good use of free speech. And we made laws to prevent that from happening. Right now, putting disinformation on social media and having people share it with hundreds of their friends is kind of like shouting fire in a crowded theater. And most of the time it's anonymous. You know, so how do we control that? Well, I'm not so sure we can, but that adds to the polarization. You know, last year, Don DePluma and Jim Haslam wrote an editorial on free speech, primarily for students at UT because of all the problems that we're having on campuses. But anyway, they quoted Arthur Brooks, who's an author who wrote Love Your Enemies. He said, "We now live in a culture of contempt where we view those of whom we disagree as not only different, but worthless. It is this mentality that risks turning our youngest citizens off from engaging in democracy altogether." That's a sad state of affairs. You know, we fuel this with biased media. We fuel this with disinformation on social media. And I guess my question is, you know, at what cost? Are ratings and social media clicks worth the division and lack of trust in our country. The networks have given up. That's the way I believe. And I will tell you that if we're going to solve this, it has to start with two things: local media and education. Pew Research also, most U.S. adults, 85% believe local news outlets are at least somewhat important. They're not saying they trust them, they're just saying they're somewhat important, okay? So, and in Knoxville, we are very lucky. You've got 3 local stations, a newspaper and a radio community that are involved in this community. They care about this community. They want to see, they want to see this community. They are doing fair and balanced news, all of them. And I will tell you that, you know, I look at the people on our newscast, Robin Wilhoit and Lori Tucker and Casey Willis and that Brittany girl. They have families in this community. They live in this community. They want to see this community grow and succeed and the educational system, you know, get better and better. And I know that they care about it they do fair and balanced news, every one of them. I know for a fact that when I get a call from somebody and says, we didn't think you did a story right, I go through and I check to make sure. And if we need to correct something or we need to do, I mean, everybody makes a mistake every now and then. I know that we do when you're doing hundreds and hundreds of stories daily or weekly, things might slip through. But the fact of the matter is, the people in our community care about these news organizations. You really do care. Local news cares. I will tell you, the networks have given up. So. And then the education system, UT, University of Tennessee College of Communications and Information. Dean Mazur, who's been around for a couple of years, and I know we had him speak here. Dean Mazur is an amazing, he certainly a true journalist himself. And what he's doing is building a really strong school. I think it's one of the finest schools right now in the country. I know a lot of people think the Cronkite School in Arizona is it, even Northwestern or whatever, but UT really has done a wonderful job, and he's really stepped it up. And what he's done is taken that Pat Summit teamwork approach, and I mean, let's face it, we've got what he does is he gets these kids involved, and that teamwork approach. We've got the Daily Beacon, the Ablaze magazine, the UTK radio, the volunteer channel, all of these things. They bring all of these kids together and have them build, and it's a team effort. And that's how they learn. That's how they become leaders, as we know. I mean, he's hired a lot of journalists. I mean, Brooks Clark and Joe Staver are just prime examples of that. Brittany is having students students produce newscasts on the volunteer channel. And Pat Summit will be very proud of the teamwork that's showing and that's putting together, okay? So we're very lucky here. I mean, we do have something. There is hope out there. Let me put it for the media. And we have to have it. I mean, journalism is not dead. It's changing and remains more vital than ever. And we have to push these students to step up. We have to push our local news organizations to step up. I mean, we can do this. Trust, building trust. The problem is, and we know this, and you know this, when we lose trust, it's hard to get back. It's hard to get back. Trust is earned, and it may take time, but anyway, we can do this. Look, I know I've had the adventure of a lifetime. I guess my greatest passion now is helping others, like Olivia and Harry, and have that same adventure. You know, it's just it's just too important. We've got too much at stake, and so, anyway. Thank you for putting up with me, okay?
Any questions for Dave?
Sure.
I'm just wondering, the journalism students, for both of you that you're saying, you're not having the robust newsrooms at the News Sentinel, and I know even the news stations are not employing the number of people they used to. What are these kids seeing their job these days when they're getting into journalism?
What have they seen their job be?
Yeah, what do they see themselves doing? I mean, you're just not having. Are they thinking I'm going to be a podcaster? I mean, the news has changed.
Part of
so
that,
much.
I tell you what's it's the digital world. Everything's going digital, and we know that. But students, look, my bottom line, and it always is. I mean, I say it to people who come in writing. You've got to have that basic writing, that level. That's of course I teach writing, obviously, but it's all going to digital, and that's where we're headed. And they know that, and then they're smart enough with all their phones, and they get most of their news from digital, so they know that. But the jobs are there. What's happening right now, today in this business, it's tough. All of the groups, Gray owns us, and Tegna is BIR, and Nexstar is six ATE, but the fact of the matter, all of them, our budgets are tight. The digital world doesn't bring in the money that the broadcast side does. Those commercials that they put on the air bring in more money than what's happening in the digital world. And so we're not hiring as many people as we used to. And a lot of companies are laying off. CNN just had an awful lot of layoffs. But they're out there. The problem, in my mind, we need to hire the best. And there's a lot of solid journalists, and UT's doing a good job of teaching them, so. Yes?
After considering the importance of being a team player with all of the leaders that you've interacted with throughout your career, the good, the bad, what would you say is the most or a couple of the most important attributes of a leader, and how do we as the public discern who the good leaders are, because everything is filtered through the lens of the media?
The most important attributes of a leader, I think, look, I tell my students there are 4 keys to winning, but I won't go over that because that's a whole lecture, but the fact of the matter is teamwork is extremely important, but attitude. I think you have to have a good attitude. You have to be, if you're a grumpy old man, which I am sometimes, but you have to have a good attitude. You have to be able to you don't listen to people with bad attitudes. I don't anyway. And I think that is really, and then integrity. I mean, there's, I can't tell you how many people I saw in New York when somebody would do something, somebody else would take credit for it. And I was like, come on, let's have a little integrity here, okay? But attitude and integrity, I think, are important. Yes?
I had a friend of mine whose son went into journalism, or went off to school, got into a very prestigious school of journalism. He was son of a lawyer, and this will put it in perspective. And I'd had a high school journalism course, so I know enough not to know. But this is what he began to report to his father, who would pass it on to me. That at that school they were teaching him that if you really want to be successful in journalism, you need to have a point of view, and you need to present everything in accordance with that point of view. And this will show what's happening to your profession. After 4 years of that, he decided to become a lawyer.
Good for him. Good for him.
I'm not going to mention it out loud, but it's a very well-known school of journalism, and that seems to be what they're teaching.
Well, that's one of the problems, obviously. I mean, I can't imagine who would do that, but the business has changed, unfortunately, and that's just wrong. I know an awful lot of people who went to law school and then became journalists also, so. Last question.
So I have a question about the relationship between polarization and media that you brought up in your lecture. I really enjoyed your lecture, by the way. I guess my question is, like, isn't this kind of a chicken or an egg situation? Like, is it the case that the media is responding to this polarization that we see in society to chase this market segment? Or is it the fact that basically it went the other way around, that the media in some way is causing the polarization to occur, right? It could go either direction.
The media caused the polarization. That's exactly what I feel, okay? And I was a guy who worked at Fox News. As I said, when Fox News started, we were fair and balanced, and there was this opinion programming, but we add to it, okay? Unfortunately. And I'm talking about the network media, so that's, all right.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.